Where does the work come from? So if you're working with a team, there's any number of sources of demand for your team's time. I'm going to give you a tool today called the work intake analysis. We're going to walk through the steps of how you can identify where the work comes from. Welcome back to the Coffeehouse. My name is Vic Bonacci, and I love working with teams. I enjoy especially to see them make progress, to become more effective as a team, high performing, get the work done that the business is really valuing. And one of the things that I often see that gets in a team's way is not knowing what to work on next. What's the next priority? So one way that you could get on top of this very big challenge is to consider using this tool called the work intake analysis so that you could identify what are the sources of work? Where are we getting our requests from? What well do requirements spring out of, right? So if you're working by yourself, this might not be as big a deal. For example, when I'm working to plan videos or podcasts or other work, I could keep track of what I need to do on a big to-do list. Maybe a personal Kanban board, something like that. But everything to me is visible to the extent that I make it visible, right? And hopefully I'm getting better at making things visible. But when you're working with a team, all bets are off. Now, that's not because the team is nefariously trying to go behind anyone's back. It's just that there's more people, there's more complexity inherent in the system the bigger your team gets. So let's imagine that you're working on a scrum team. Traditionally, you've got a product owner who would own the backlog, they would prioritize it, keep it fresh, keep refining things, breaking things down, etc. In addition, they're talking to not only a set of stakeholders, but also acting as a funnel to any other requests that come in. Now, if you're not quite working ideally in this situation, you might be finding that some of the work is getting lost along the way, right? What I like to do is bring the team together for this 20-30 minute little session. And we're going to have make it a safe meeting where we can share things. We want to have people reach into their memories, go back 2 weeks or 2 months or a quarter or more, and try to identify where did we get the work that we ended up doing in the sprint or in the interval when we were doing the work. What I would do is bring people together in a room or virtually and open up a spreadsheet. Now you might want to start organizing a spreadsheet. Here's an example I'll share with you. You could see I've got the board divided into proactive work, things that we can plan, we can foresee, we could talk about in advance, versus more of a reactive set of requirements, things that come up suddenly, last minute, urgently, we need this by. So knowing if it's proactive or reactive is a simple first step when you start identifying what were the things we worked on. You might go around the room and ask each person to write things out onto sticky notes with Sharpie markers and then put them up on a whiteboard, or of course you can accomplish this using a Miro-like virtual whiteboard as well. You can begin sorting not only is it proactive or reactive, but you can start classifying it by things like what is the source? Where is it coming from? Is this something that went through ServiceNow or Jira, a formal type of a ticketing system? Second source could be something like a meeting where we got together with this other team or this stakeholder and we talked about it a little bit in advance. We knew it was coming down the line. Those items may or may not make their way into your ticketing system, but that's a second source. And then of course there's things that you would consider as drive-bys or ad hoc shoulder taps. This source is one that's really hard to get your finger on, but probably the most difficult two final sources are things that come up to the team where they as an internal team or a subset of the team say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we did this? Kind of off the books. Not intentionally perhaps, but just hey, in the moment we're like, hey, we need this somewhere down the road, or let's do that this sprint if we've got extra time. And finally, if it's a single person, an individual identifies the work, I want to work on this. It's kind of a pet project of mine or a little experimentation of mine or something that I would like to advance, but it doesn't need the team and therefore I don't need to put it in the ticketing system. There may be other sources as well, but those are the formal and the not so formal ones. So get those identified. For each item that you're trying to call out in this work intake analysis, it's good to know approximately what type of source it is. Another classification you can use is something called the class of service. So for example, is this item an urgent need? If it's urgent, it's like a drop everything or get it done in the next week or something, it's urgent. Secondly, might be just kind of date driven. Like there's some fixed date, it might not be in the next 2 weeks, it might be 2 months or 2 years down the road, but there's a fixed date, so it might be kind of lingering until the date approaches and then it has more attention. A third class of service might be just the standard first in, first out. So an order comes in and it moves up the stack until finally another order comes in which would go below it, just like so, first in, first out. And then finally you can have those class of service items that are mostly intangible. We don't quite know when they're going to get done. We just know that we kind of sort of want to get it done. It doesn't have a due date, perhaps. It's not tracked in our formal backlog, but it's one of those things that, or maybe it is tracked in the backlog, but it's still one of those things that it's hard to put a thumb on. What's the date? When are we going to slot it in? When is it necessary? So class of service is useful. As I said, the source is useful. Is it proactive, reactive? And there's other items that you can consider. So for example, who's the owner of this? Is it our team owning it? Is it someone else? Are there dependencies? What are the handoffs involved here? How frequently is this type of ticket given to us? Is it something that comes in on a regular cadence, once a week, once a quarter? Or is it something that kind of just comes and goes? And when it arrives, we get many of them, and then when it goes away, it's not. So you can capture those and other details, of course, in this work intake analysis document. Now, whether you save it as a spreadsheet or some other form is really up to you. It's the conversation that's important. Even though this exercise may only take 20 or 30 minutes of brainstorming and comparing notes and talking out loud, you don't want to just set it and forget it. This is one of those items that you'll bring back. You might update the document at a future, let's say, retrospective where you uncover another source or class of service or something along those lines, another item that you would like to classify. Work intake analysis is one way that teams could become more lean, more predictable. I would recommend the book Making Work Visible, Exposing Time Theft to Optimize Work and Flow by Dominica de Grandis. I hope you enjoyed today's topic, the work intake analysis tool. If you found this video helpful, I invite you to like or subscribe. And share this with your friends. There's no better gift than sharing and a good cup of coffee. Until next time, enjoy your coffee with friends.